Hey guys, in today's video we're going to answer a couple questions. What happened, what's gonna happen next, and are altcoins bottomed here? It's been a while, so we have a lot to talk about. Gonna just kind of anti-clickbait this off the jump and let you know there might not be any super firm conclusions here, but just in a zoomed out way, I'm gonna let you know how I'm thinking about this and just try to provide a little bit of perspective for whatever it's worth. As always, not financial advice. When I say you, I'm really just talking to myself. I'll just make sure you always have a plan for your own portfolio goals and risk tolerance, and just be ready to execute that for yourself. But anyway, let's just jump right in. So, we've got Bitcoin here, and I've maintained all my lines and squiggles going back for a year or two, so ignore all this noise. But yeah, if you weren't chronically online during this upper range here in the last couple months, you wouldn't know the mayhem that happened on crypto Twitter and the timeline in here, all the drama and horror and all the drama, horror, and intrigue that happened in here. But let's build a little bit of context in here without rehashing absolutely everything. Generally, in this area, I'm going to say like vaguely to here-ish, you basically had like holiday stuff, which ended up topping out kind of when Sailor finished blowing his load. But nothing super remarkable in there, just some like late in the year volatility, blah, blah, blah. And then I think this is really the heat of the meat right here. And I want to really just zoom in here. This is roughly like mid-January through the first weekend of February, aka just like doomsday here. So what happened? If you're on crypto Twitter, you'll probably be familiar with this, but if you're not, you should be. But here's what went down. There are people who kind of up in here started to call for complacency. As in, hey, we're not really going anywhere. Good news isn't really doing a whole lot. We've like cooled off a little bit from the highs at like 108, 109, and it feels like we're going to drop. I initially dismissed that because I wasn't really seeing anything that said we needed to drop a ton. I think like revisiting range lows like kind of made sense. You could argue it was always in the chart, but we were getting good news that didn't pump us, and we were also getting bad news in here that like didn't do a ton to dump us below like the high 90s. So my thought was just kind of like, this is just business as usual up here in this upper range, and then we're going to go up. But I was wrong. And let's talk about the news that happened in here. So in terms of good news that didn't pump us and bad news that didn't dump us, the good news that didn't pump us was we got really good regulatory stuff, just like too many great sound bites coming out of like Congress people and Trump and etc. We had the strategic Bitcoin reserve chatter. That all happened kind of up in here too. We had, crypto council, David Sachs, etc., talking about, all the deregulation they wanted to do and how they wanted to make the US at the forefront of crypto. More recently, we have, states buying, like 21 states, could be like, tens of billions of dollars in buying pressure. And then most recently, just today, like just around the South, we've got Abu Dhabi, which isn't the Saudis buying, but a lot of people are just going to say, homeboys are in the desert wearing turbans, with like the red and white checkers and stuff. I'm going to, just on a geography fail, say close enough. That's what most people say. I've read a couple books, so I know the difference, but I'm not going to talk down to y'all. So yeah, that's all down there. That was a lot of this kind of happened later. So the big three that were kind of happening in this area are right here. Then we had really bad news that didn't really dump us below like 98, 99. And this is why I thought we were going to kind of go up. Because again, like good news didn't pump us, but bad news didn't dump us. We got three absolutely insanely bearish things that happened that if we were in a different phase of the cycle, I would say any one of these three things I'm about to mention could have individually topped us. And I don't care who you are, you look at any one of those, like kind of like late cycle, once like macros shifted and prices are higher, you look at any one of these and you'll go like, oh yeah, that's a top. Of course, why wouldn't that be a top? And those three things are Trump meme coin plus generational rug with Melania, right? That happened like kind of like here, I think on like the 18th, 19th, he got that popping, and then the Melania follow up like a day later. Then we had the kind of a legit black swan DeepSeek FUD. Like, hey, all these tech companies that are propping up our stock market, which we're correlated to, are all just a fucking house of cards. And this like crack team from China just came in and they got it done on a shoestring budget. Everybody's doomed. Like, that didn't end up really getting hashed out all the way or playing out all the way, but like for a while there, that looked pretty insanely bad. I think that, if I recall correctly, that kind of happened here on the 27th. We got that big wick down in a recovery. And see, that's what I'm talking about here. Like, this wick down to kind of like 97, 98, and then an immediate recovery, like a V reversal back up here to 100. That wasn't enough. And then finally, it took the Trump tariff palooza during illiquid weekend, right? So you just get these three just generational once a cycle hammers, 1, 2, 3. And this survived the first two. You know, we got that bounce back from number 1, this bounce back from number 2. Kind of we're about to put in new highs. And then finally, let's go to the 4-hour chart to look at this just absolute horror show. I think it was right here where we got this tariff palooza going on. And this was just insane, insanely hard to stomach. At this point, I had de-risked some as part of just regular, prudent, boring selling. And then I faded the like complacency people. But I didn't know that Trump was going to announce all these tariffs right after the DeepSeek thing had kind of softened us up during like an illiquid weekend. And net effect is basically we got this, we ate shit here, kind of started grinding down. And then for a period that felt like an absolute eternity, we did this just horrible, relentless grind down to hell the entire weekend, like Saturday morning all the way into Sunday night. Just no high. What you want to see here is a high volume capitulation, acceleration downward, which we ended up getting like in the wee hours of like Sunday night into Monday morning. But this is just, I don't care who you are, how much conviction you had. This is some like, oh no, like, is it over type of thing? I have strong conviction it's not. But me, like so many people, I was thinking like, I think we're going to keep going, but I never assign 100% probabilities to anything. I don't like the way this is shaping up. And nobody around me, people that are way smarter than me, nobody has firm answers here. Everybody's completely listless. And I took some off the table right around in here. Actually, I think I literally like right here right before we accelerated downward. And I'm glad I did. And in hindsight, I still would have done the same thing, because you don't know that Trump was just using this as a negotiation tactic. There's a good chance he was, but you don't know that. And even though I haven't, made $1 trillion this cycle, I've personally been fortunate enough to have made enough to where, like, if that really was it, or it was gonna be curtains for a period of like maybe many, many months, potentially a year, before, like, the fog of war of all these tariffs and their impact on inflation and the geopolitical tensions around it get sussed out, I was like, I haven't taken enough off the table. I'm gonna roll some out here and I'm gonna let the rest ride. And so I got my portfolio, like, mentally and emotionally into a better balance point here. But anyway, we got that final acceleration down into a real capitulation wick, V reversal, and then finally we just been kind of like crapping since, right? So let me see if I can remove some of these drawings. There we go. Anyway, so where are we today? By the way, like, holy shit, these 4 dailies, that's just something else. Yuck. Talk about just compression, volatility compression here. So let's just recontextualize this a little bit in terms of, like, where do we go here from here, right? We've got these bearish things that, again, like, the worst that those 3 things back to back to back could do is get us to this range low right here. And the reason I'm optimistic and why I think that we're going to go up is because it took 3 things, again, 3 different things that could have individually topped a market back to back to back to simply get us to a range low on a wick that mostly V reversed, to a range low that we visited like 8 times, and we've been to range highs, similar amount of times. So it's really just business as usual here. And if you get away from these kind of individual headlines and just look at conditions, I've outlined this in a previous video, but it's this simple. Let me just kill some of these. Do a little cleanup here for y'all, because you deserve it. This is the most simple way I'm thinking about it. We haven't gone higher because macro is not yet good enough, right? Jerome Powell said, we are above the terminal rate, meaning, he's higher than where he would keep it once things get a little bit more in balance. We're still doing QT, meaning the Fed is spinning assets off its balance sheet. Interest rates are higher than they want to be. And so, like, Bitcoin is kind of like a little stuffed here. If you look back at what the Fed is doing in terms of QT or QE, you would notice that last cycle, the instant QT ended, ETH started running like crazy, like to the nanosecond. So we haven't gone higher or have been range bound to the upside because macro is not yet good enough. And I think that we've been range bound to the downside or supported to the downside because macro not yet good enough. And what I mean by that is, if you break apart this language a little bit, macro is not yet good enough, meaning we are in a place that's bad for crypto and risk broadly, to a place where we're in a point of potential and then moving to a better place, as in The market recognizes that there is still a lot of potential for risk and crypto conditions to get better. If this ASI or advanced smile indicator doesn't make that super clear. So, you have, another way to put this is just too much opportunity remaining. You take the regulatory stuff, you take the fact that Jay Powell said we're above the terminal rate, we're still in quantitative tightening or tapering. And, I think we're just obviously downside protected here. So where do we go from here? My base case is we just got a good candle here because Abu Dhabi said they were buying. That's rad. Obviously that didn't like shoot us off to the moon because of that, but that's good signs. Where are we going next? I would say my base case is on this. If those three things couldn't get us into like the high 80s, I think we're going to kind of just do something like this for a little bit. And as long as inflation, which has been just kind of like steadily and linearly going up, abates even a tiny bit, I think the instant we get good data, we do one of these. Inflation has been for the last I think 4 or 5 months just going up like this. Kind of, if you zoom way out, it's done kind of one of these. We're kind of like right in here. And what I think is happening is the market is just kind of calling a bluff on the last couple months of inflation going back up from like the 2s to like the 3s, because the thing that makes up inflation, you've got like goods, services, fuel, and housing, food, whatever. I think housing is the one that's stubborn, and you typically have like 12 to 18 month delay on housing because of practical stuff like leases and other sorts of just like contract terms around housing. I think the market's kind of calling the bluff a little bit. It's still like being cautious as inflation goes up, but all of these are going down and looking pretty good. So the instant we get just like this inflation kind of just even doing a little bit of a level off, I think that the S&P and crypto just go absolutely balls to the wall. And I think that's also going to line up for like the Fed FOMC meeting in mid-March to potentially end QT, which takes us to our next question, which is what's next for alts? Are alts bottomed? I'll clean this up later. It's my OCD. Let's look at Bitcoin dominance. I called for, it was a little bit of a shit post, but there's always a little bit of truth in there. I called for, jokingly, kind of alt season to happen, or like, what if it happened 45 minutes ago? What would you think about that? Right here on February 8th, or 9th rather. And I just saw some stuff happening in charts kind of qualitatively that just kind of gave me one of those feelings deep down in my plums. And obviously there's been a lot of volatility in here the last week, but Bitcoin dominance has just been one of those like Looney Tunes, like Roadrunner anvil sound moves down. I still think this might oscillate a little bit in here, but if it can just kind of like crab around in here and not do anything too nuts, I think if like QT does get signaled that it's gonna end in March, I think people kind of like front run that. We've had enough data points on that to where like it just might be toast, and then alts could really start to move. Whether we see like ETH go north of 4K, which is a joke at this point. Remains to be seen, but I think that if QT ends, that will probably do it. So fingers crossed there. Regarding meme coin charts and stuff like that, I just want to show y'all a pattern that I think is kind of prevailing across like the big meme coins that I call like tier 1 meme coins, as in the ones that have over a year of chart history, kind of around $500 million to $1 billion in market cap, and are very broadly available on centralized exchanges that are fussy about their listings, like Coinbase and Robinhood. WIF as an example, a lot of charts look like this. You've got WIF, Bonk, Pepe, Mog, PopCat. They all kind of look like this, where here's what you want to see is, see if I can zoom in on this a little bit. You have this like acceleration downward that's been happening for months, like since Solana rolled over here in like November. You know, this has just been down city, but more recently you have an acceleration downwards into this sort of like capitulation wick here. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. Right, you see this like high volume capitulation here. It's actually overlapping a little bit. And then you can see that it's still going down, but it's kind of slowly like leveling out here. And then we got this like big green candle here, which like what you kind of want to see with these, not necessarily even this, like this to me, even if you think that there are a lot of good signs here, like this capitulation wick, and then kind of like a recovery here above a lot of this noise here. Even though you see some good signs here, this is still like a little bit knife catchy. Like if Bitcoin suddenly eats shit, like this could go right back down. But this is starting to look kind of good. Like if you want to start to see some mini time-based capitulation here, and then a curl up and maybe like a little retest and back out. Typically like buying this for me is good because you avoid the opportunity cost of waiting. You also avoid buying down here on a knife catch, and then it just keeps going down. But if you have conviction in the bag or a good thesis like that, I mean, you could buy right here, and you know that might be a good punt for you. Not financial advice, but just something I look at doing for me. PopCap might be actually a good chart to look at. What am I doing here? This is a little more like time capitulation. You want to see this sort of like at least a couple weeks of sideways, and then you want to see a high that comes in kind of above that. But you have to be careful because honestly, like ideally you want to see this a lot longer, flat, and then kind of come up. Because one really good way to get wrecked on this is, you know, without context of like big moves Bitcoin's done or, you know, disastrous news kind of abating. This looks like bottomed, right? Just because the chart ends here and it kind of put in a low and has been coming up. But if you like just ignore this and pretend like the chart ended like here, you kind of have this exact same pattern here. And you also have it here. And you also like, you have it here, right? And so on. And you can have an infinite amount of those, and it just keeps going lower and lower. So again, like based on the context of like the cycle and macro and like the bad news not really like wearing on Bitcoin too much more, like you can contextualize things and say, okay, this pattern is kind of like these previous ones that led to new lows, but I kind of like this capitulation volume here. And it feels like we might still crab, but like these entries, if you have a thesis on PopCat, like mean reverting, probably not too bad, right? So yeah, I mean, that's my thought there. I would just, again, charts can screw you by going down and then not just sideways and back down, but they can go down and then kind of tease you into buying by going up for a while before going back down. And just these points here will destroy you. And typically, people that buy those patterns will buy them like right at the local nano top. They'll get just enough confidence built up here, thinking it's like a wall of worry climb right before next leg down. But yeah, so generally, let's go back to Bitcoin real quick. Again, we have, I'm such an amateur with this stuff. There we go. We're just waiting on macro. We're waiting on macro. And bad news hasn't really done anything too horrifying. Good news isn't really pumping us too much. So we're in a bit of a holding pattern here. As always, have your own plan, have your own thesis. Make sure that you have enough exposure to the market to where you feel good in terms of like sticking to your thesis and sticking to your guns, but also like don't forget to take profit at regular intervals, so you have like the emotional stability to weather storms. I'm not like mostly out of the market, but I have enough out to where like this sort of thing, this like doomsday stuff where it really makes you ask hard questions about the integrity of the cycle, can't hurt me anymore, right? Like I'll still be like, oh, I wish what I had left in the game could go back up, but like it's not like I round tripped it again, 4 years later, I'm such an idiot anymore. So remember, stick to a plan. That's kind of all I had. I did want to drop a little bit of lifestyle alpha for you guys. So I was just in Europe, at my grandma's funeral in Munich. I couldn't get too much time there because I've got a 1-year-old at home and a lot of work to do. So I was there for literally like 48 hours. Let me tell you something. If you're ever wanting to do something like nefarious in Europe, book a longer trip than a couple days, because I have never had border and customs police like shake me down like that before. Every single time I had any interaction, they were like, what are you doing? Like 2 days. What are you doing? What are you up to? To the point where I got back to the US and the guy at JFK was like, how long were you gone for? And I said 2 days. And he was like, what were you up to? And I said, my grandma died, had to go to a funeral in Munich. And he paused a beat and he was like, listen, man, that's kind of, you put me in a tough spot because that's just kind of depressing to investigate. And if you show me proof of that, then I just feel like an asshole. But I'm going to be honest with you. If you didn't look like you're in the FBI in a way that's equal parts like boring and kind of sexy, me and the boys would have you in a back room, bent over a steel table, and we'd be so far up your ass that we'd be losing wristwatches up there, okay? So just be careful with these little 2-day trips in the future. Welcome back, stamp my passport. But yeah, be careful out there. Definitely have a story if you're popping over there for a couple days. But anyway, that is it for me. Hopefully we'll be reporting more regularly this week, next week. I think we're still going to crab for a while, but could also be decision time soon. We'll see. Anyway, thanks for listening. Catch you guys in the next one.